Good afternoon, everybody. I'm Asaf Romarowski. I am the Executive Director of SPME and the Association for Middle East Studies in Africa, and it is my pleasure to once again welcome you to our webinar series. This afternoon, we have the privilege and opportunity to hear from our colleague and friend, Barak Mendelsohn, who will talk to us about his personal experience at Haverford College and also at large about what he's been observing in small liberal arts colleges in general. Barak by training is a Middle East historian, expert on terrorism, has been at Haverford College now for close to almost, I believe, 18 years, if I'm correct. And of late, he also has experienced as a result of 10/7, personally experienced a growing backlash of anti-Semitism on him and his family, and hopefully he will be able to share some of those observations, as well as what he recently published, which I find to be very interesting, the reactions of students who were considering Haverford College and what the reaction for them has been, Jewish students, about their potential safety and why they chose not to come to Haverford. So a lot to discuss. Format will be, those of you with us in the past know, Barak will talk for about 25 minutes or so. Then we'll go into Q&A. Q&A will be via the chat, so please type in your questions via the chat, and we will do our best to get to all of them. If we do not, feel free to email us after the webinar, and we will do our best to respond in a timely fashion. So really, without further ado, Barak, welcome, and thank you for joining us, and the virtual floor is now yours.
Thank you, Asaf, and thank you everybody who's on the line now. I think the best way to start is to just say a few things about myself. I came from Israel to the United States in 2000 to pursue my PhD. The original idea was that I will move back to Israel then to work there, but life had different plans for me. 9/11 happened. Suddenly I had options in the US. The second Intifada happened, and Israel was no longer the country that I was living, and I was not the same person that left Israel after spending years here. And so ultimately, in 2007, I settled in the United States, and in the past 5 years, I've been a proud American citizen. I've been working in the past 17 years at Haverford College. It's a Quaker institution just outside of Philadelphia. My hiring was problematic because I teach about violence. Now, of course, teaching about violence does not mean that you are approving violence, encouraging violence, but this is important for the mindset that I think that you will be able to identify that is actually dominant in the campus. And so since my arrival to Haverford, I've been teaching about questions of security, especially terrorism. I'm an international relations scholar. I'm in the political science department, and my area of expertise is the Middle East. When October 7 happened, it was extremely hard because I came from Israel. Anybody that came from Israel know that at least you don't need to move more than 1 or 2 degrees of separation to know somebody that was directly affected by the events of October 7. But shocked as I was a scholar, and I thought that my role is to inform. So I organized a teaching about the strategic implications of the October 7 attack, just fulfilling my role as a college professor. That was when I understood that apparently I misjudged how people actually see me. So fortunately, outside of Harvard, there are still people that see me as a scholar, but it became very clear from the responses that I got at Haverford that I was reverted back to being that Jew from Israel, that somebody needs to be talking alongside him to balance him, as if I'm coming to my classroom draped with the Israeli flag, or as if I'm doing only hasbara rather than actually doing my job, which is to be a political analyst, criticizing everybody as I see, keeping my professional integrity. The students planned a demonstration against me. I mean, my dilemma before doing the teaching was, am I ready emotionally to do something like that? Do I have enough information to be able to do a smart teaching? I did not imagine that I will start suffering this kind of hate. Ultimately, the teaching went relatively well, but this was just the beginning of a long period of finally being aware of the level of anti-Semitism around me. And of course, it magnified so significantly after October 7. 2 weeks later, when I gave a talk that was scheduled during the summer in a class of my Palestinian colleague, Saida Chan, about the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, class that I gave talks 4 times before without any problem. But when I came to Swarthmore to give the talk this time, there were demonstrations directly against me. People accused me of ridiculous things like responsibility for the killing, the murder of a 6-year-old Muslim kid in Chicago, and a rest of other accusations that are just completely ridiculous. But I came there just as a scholar. This is what I study. I'm not an English professor that decided that now it's the time to figure out what's going on in the Middle East and to start speaking about that. As I said, I have professional integrity. I speak about things that I understand, that I know. I'm not making, I don't go outside my lane to things that I don't know. My personal identity crisis soon got way beyond me because I started hearing from students. Now, most of the time, we don't really know what's going on with the students, and they rarely will speak with the faculty and tell them about their experiences. But I was lucky that this year I actually had some ears on the ground. And I was getting extremely worried to hear the experiences of students. I'm an adult, I can handle a lot of what is thrown against me. But many of our Jewish students cannot. And what they experienced was just horrendous, the level of social pressure. In people that were students' friends telling them, you got to renounce your Zionist identity if you want us to stay in touch. I just imagine making that kind of demand of anybody else to give up on part of their identity. And you can have Israel as part of your identity and still be extremely critical of Israeli policies. There is no problem with that. I do that all the time. But Israel is part of my identity. Israel is part of the identity of almost all Jews, right? And it's not that difficult. I would say that everybody should be a Zionist if you understand that Zionism is just basically the belief that the Jewish people have the right for self-determination in their ancestral home, right? You can argue then about policies and different ways of how we manifest Zionism. But Zionism have become a curse. And even though it's part of our identity, there are students that demand from Jewish students to give up on their identity. Imagine that happening to a gay student. The whole college will be up in arms and for right reasons. When it comes to Jews, nobody gives a damn. It's actually even encouraged. The social pressure on the students is remarkable to sign statements, declarations, a lot of things that are extremely hostile to Israel, but go beyond policy. Again, you can have policy disagreement. But if you see October 7 only through colonial lenses, and you cannot even mention the word Hamas, and you completely ignored the events of October 7, this is not debates over policy anymore. And you can really see in all those documents, all those letters, I mean, there is a low, a sort of a shallow level of political criticism, but what's really behind it is an ideology of hate and anti-Semitism. And that's just horrendous. Jewish students, regardless of where they come from, are being referred to as genociders, Jewish students of color. Right? No, you can't be a Jewish student of color. If you're Jewish, you are a white oppressor. Therefore, even if you're a Jewish student of color, even a foreigner, not from the US, students like that came under tremendous attack from pro-Palestinian and from people that they thought were their friends, which is just when we, at the end of November, so the way things went in November, after Thanksgiving, 3 Palestinian students were shot in Vermont. One of them is a Harvard student. No relation to the conflict was proven. If anything, it seems that the guy that shot them was unstable, and if anything, had some preference for Hamas. But the students on campus tried to use that to mobilize their anti-Israeli stance. And as I said, this is all deeply involved with anti-Semitic tropes. At that point, as I get information about how they're trying to abuse that tragedy, I decided that it's time for me to stand up and say something. And so I used my megaphone, my Twitter account, and my stature as an expert on terrorism, to say that if I'm a parent to a Jewish kid, I would not send them to Haverford College, that the college has a Jewish problem, that the leaders of the student body are at least tolerating anti-Semitism and are serving as Hamas apologists. That opened a whole shitstorm. Suddenly, the stuff that we actually, that was within Haverford started blowing up, and people outside started paying attention. We also organized immediately a secret meeting with Jewish students. It had to be secret because we couldn't say where we're going to hold it because of fear of the demonstrators against us. And because the atmosphere of fear among the students was such that everybody suspected everybody. And you could not really tell who is really your friend. So we managed to bring a group of about 30, 40 students in a period of a day, and through very underground, friend by bring friend kind of way. And I have to say that as somebody coming from Israel, to hear about their experiences was shocking. Yeah, I was not familiar with the way that Jewish Americans experience anti-Semitism. I'm still learning. But to see the stories of the students, to see the faces, to see students that were horrified after October 7, only to find that they have no safe space on campus, and that if they even dare to mourn about the loss of their people in the worst day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust, they found that they have no place for that. And if they even try to find a place for that, all they're going to get is hate instead. And that was one of the most devastating experiences that I had in my years in the US, and I've been living in the US now for about 23 years. It was also in some way uplifting because after that meeting, after students started speaking up, there was a sense of community. And since then, I think we started rebounding. We started organizing a much better in how we are actually facing this kind of situation. The spring was extremely bad as well. There are way too many details to give, but I will just give you two examples from the spring. We brought the Nova movie to Haverford. Now, you would think that a college that is so high on its own drugs about its how humanitarian it is, how it is against all social evils, how it is for social justice. And yet, when we had a movie about the horrendous massacre, about horrendous sexual crimes, there was a group of students that decided that they got to demonstrate against that screening. And not only that, they put on themselves masks supposedly to protect them from COVID, but really in order to intimidate. And they arranged themselves quietly in a way that nearly blocked the door to where the screening was, so that it still intimidates people. And then when people from the community outside of Haverford, there were a couple of elderly people that were very upset and shouted at them. Their response later on was to complain at the college about what was done for them. And this is just incredible. The chutzpah that they had was just horrendous. Suddenly, sexual crimes need to be contextualized. Yeah? Again, no other minority that would ever be tolerated. But we're Jews, and at Haverford College, Jews can be victims. Nobody in the administration really gives a damn, especially if they don't feel that they're actually suffering any personal serious consequences from themselves. Um, uh, Again, too many things, but during the spring, we also see Chabad posters about Shabbat dinner, not anything that relates to Israel, being torn. The college responded that that seems to be the wind. Well, apparently the wind is so anti-Semitic that it manages to get even into buildings and read posters in ways that other posters are not. Again, a lot more happened during the summer, encampments and all that stuff. But the summer was not as quiet as we were hoping would be as well. Asaf mentioned the email that I posted 3 weeks ago. Apparently, the indoctrination to hate starts way before the students even arrive on campus. They have different social spaces where incoming students are communicating. And apparently, in those spaces already, we see both the indoctrination, the Jew hatred, and the isolation of Jewish students. It all appears in an email that a student that came to Hartford and was supposed to be my advisee. And since the college failed to actually contact him, and I struggled to be his advisor, because when I asked, the college was not very happy to help me get to be advisor of Jewish students that asked to have me as their advisor. But they couldn't really reach him, so they turned to me. I found a student in Israel. He wrote a long email saying that he prefers to stay in Israel, a war zone, he said, over coming to Haverford, because at least in Israel, he doesn't need to hide who he is, and he doesn't need to fight for his identity. And I think this is awful. Now that email went viral on social media. Almost 500,000 people viewed it on Twitter, and this is putting significant pressure on the college. And yet we're not seeing any serious move from the college. So this week, the new students are coming. In fact, the international students arrived already. The first-year students that are not international are arriving tomorrow to what we call Customs Week. And all the indications are that they are heading, the Jewish students are heading into a buzzsaw. That basically in that space, they will be under tremendous social pressure to reject significant part of their Jewish identity or be ostracized. And the administration was warned by Chabad that we are very afraid of what might happen during customs. Yet we see no change. And as I said, we're extremely disturbed by what is going to happen here. And we already heard from other places how orientation taken over by students is getting its anti-Semitic color. So the problems of anti-Semitism starts even before the students arrive on campus. And so we are expecting an extremely difficult year ahead of us. Now, I just want to say a couple of comments before I start answering the Q&A. And again, just to be clear, I just gave you little of what is going on because we just don't have all the many hours to speak about that. Some points that I wanted to make. One, there is a tremendous climate of fear that prevents both students and faculty from speaking up. I was hoping that there will be more courage, though I do understand why there is not. The few people that actually dare to speak up are immediately ostracized, come under attack. Last year, we were 3. One faculty, me, one Rabbi Eli from Chabad, and one student, Eli Landau. All 3 of us were immediately chased down by the mob. By the way, in Swarthmore, I was actually chased down by the mob after my talk. And I think that it's meaningful that the attacks on Rabbi Eli and on me, because I came from Israel, I represent one aspect of Judaism that they hate, that's the Jewish state. Rabbi Eli is the embodiment of the religious Jew, with all the markers of the religious Jew. So I think it's not a surprise that the two that were under attack, not just because we spoke, but also what we represent in an environment where everything is only about identity. Important to note that the administration is not just incompetent. As the Title VI that was filed by the Deborah Project suggests, and I think that rightly so, the college has enabled this anti-Semitism, and the college is really refusing to step up and actually take meaningful action. This college is just doing whatever the students want. It only responds when the threat against the college is too high, but it's rarely deemed by them to be too much. Not even a teach-in during the spring that was involved with blood labels about how Israel is spreading COVID against the Palestinians. Also important, the college is trying, and not just at Haverford, to hide behind student autonomy. completely ignoring the fact that we're still ruled by the rules of the land, and that the rules of the college do not allow the college, do not give the college a free pass to facilitate anti-Semitism. At some point, the adults need to step up and to fulfill their role. The colleges cannot avoid that kind of role. And this is especially important in a small liberal arts college, because in big schools, you can somehow avoid or bypass the demonstrations, the social pressures. You cannot do that in an institution of 1,400 students that is so tiny that you cannot avoid it. There is just no escape. That kind of pressure is on you all the time. When I step foot on campus ground, I can't breathe as easily as when I'm outside. So the college is relying on student autonomy as their excuse. It's inexcusable, it's wrong. Then we have the issue that we are in a Quaker institution that relies on Quaker rules, including an honor code. However, in reality, we see that every time that a meaningful decision needs to be taken, all these rules, like, for example, consensus, are being thrown out because they are inconvenient. So do you think that the students do any kind of decision-making that is based on consensus when they decide to have resolutions that are strongly against Israel and that reek from anti-Semitism? Not at all. Or when the students in 2020 decided to go on a social justice strike, do you think that there were any of the procedures that Haverford needs to follow as a Quaker institution? Not at all. The same goes for the administration. The faculty are rubber stamp and they can get responsibility and authority for things that are not very meaningful. But when it comes to the meaningful things, the upper level, the senior staff is making decisions, again, without caring for the Quaker rules. Then you have the honor code that obligates the students, and the students are trying to impose also on the faculty. Right? And that honor code is fundamentally facilitating anti-Semitism. So here you have, for example, a catch-22. You got to assume that all sides in Haverford are acting in good faith. Now, if one side does not act in good faith, and the Students for Justice in Palestine, Jewish Voices for Peace, Faculty for Justice in Palestine, they're not acting in good faith. But if I dare to claim that they're not acting in good faith, and I speak truth to power, right? That's supposed to be our slogan. Then I violated their rights because I did not trust their intentions. And therefore, I'm the one that ends up being accused. So the reality is that in a place that is priding itself on confronting people, I cannot confront anybody. And of course, I cannot confront anybody because I'm also a white male, white Jewish male. If you are white now, according to the honor code, it seems that minorities can resist in any form that they want, and white people have to accept it. The current honor code is just so ridiculous, and and the student body, the whole ideology behind it, that is encompassing to the administration. Administration are not just bureaucrats. Many of our administration are ideologues. The faculty, interestingly, faculty that don't understand anything about causality, or most of the time don't understand anything about causality. You won't see there much political scientists, right, or positivists. You will see people from gender and sexuality, Africana studies, English, a lot of disciplines that have nothing to do with what is actually going on, but they help in promoting a Marxist, a version of a Marxist theory of race, And then you have the students that buy into that nonsense, and some of them are coming with their own nonsense to that. So that kind of ideology divides the world to oppressed and oppressors. Oppressors are always white. Jews are necessarily white. Even if Jews are not white, they're absolutely white. And so that kind of division is one that, again, puts Jews as candidates to suffer anti-Semitism and as an obvious target. In this regard, the DEI initiative is central to what we're seeing. I refuse to accept that you cannot do diversity without the anti-Semitism. I'm not against DEI. I'm definitely against DEI the way that it's being done at Haverford and many other places. Diversity is not just about race, and definitely not seeing Jews as part of your diversity or as a minority throws your whole commitment to diversity into the air. But we don't see it. So the DEI administrators are seeing diversity only as a matter of race. As a result, we also don't have conservative students at Harvard. And why would any conservative student come to Haverford when all they will get here will be ostracizing and isolation? Students here are also reluctant to enlist to the military. And this is maybe another important point. The same students that are now hating Israel, trust me that most of them hate the United States as much. If you buy into those ridiculous Marxist theories, then Israel is not the only problem. The problem is the United States in its imperialism. And we see ridiculous statements that really, if you go back to read about the new left of the 60s, you see the same stupid references, the colony in the belly of the beast, defining what they are, the poor people that are struggling to help the Palestinians from within the belly of the empire, the belly of the beast. Two last points. As I said, just way too many things to say. We have a bigger problem that relates to the academia more generally, and that's seeing the academia now more as social clubs rather than institutions that are supposed to produce intellectual knowledge and disseminate that kind of knowledge. And so it's a lot more about the ceremonies, about the events. There is much less about actual intellectual engagement. I now assign 50% of the amount of reading I did 17 years ago, and students still complain that they have too much work to do. That goes together with the activist turn in the academia. Now, everything is about being an activist. Now, of course, they sanctify activism for activism's sake. They don't really think about distinguishing between effective activism, which I have no problem, and performative activism, which is what most of them are actually doing. But they get that kind of support from the college to the point that activism is emphasized so much more than academic rigor. And this is ridiculous. And of course, activism is supported by faculty. You wonder who are those faculty? Well, those are rarely the faculty that actually produce knowledge. This is a good way for administrators and faculty that don't like or that the research is too hard for them. They can fall back on activism because activism is the big thing. Right? Doing what we were supposed to do for hundreds of years, that's not that as meaningful. And I will finish with the point that going back to Jewish identity. These schools, definitely I've seen signs of that at Haverford College, try to frame Judaism only as a religion. If you frame Judaism only as a religion, then anti-Zionism is no longer anti-Semitism. Right? So this is the objective behind that. Now I see Judaism as sitting on multiple legs, right? And not every Jew needs to have all these legs. You have the religious aspect, you have the language, you have the connection to the state of Israel, you have Israeli Jewish history and culture, right? I'm not religious, I don't believe in God. I do not exclude Jews that do believe in God. Yeah? You don't need to be a Zionist to be a Jew. You don't need to have that leg. But if you're an anti-Zionist, if your identity is inherently to sabotage and actually wish things that amount to genocide to about 80, 85% of your people, this is really problematic. And this is something that we have to fight with because even Jewish Voices for Peace, for example, are trying to frame Judaism in such a narrow way to legitimize anti-Semitism, their own, and anti-Semitism from others. And I will stop with that because just way too many things to say and not enough time.
Great. Well, Barak, thank you for that. I mean, thank you for the telltale all and for sharing your story, which is unfortunately not new to many of us who've heard all these stories, but to hear it from friends and colleagues, you and I have known each other for years, and what you've been facing on a campus that you find it should be your academic home is very telling about how radicalized the environment has gotten and how challenging the times that we live in. There's a lot to discuss, and we have many questions. I'll let Alex start with the first question. As you know, obviously, we've done a lot of research. We've wrote a book together on Quakerism and Quakerism in the Middle East. So there is a lot to discuss on that topic. But for sake of time, without going into all this, let me have Alex ask the first question, and then we'll go into the Q&A because there's a lot to address in the time that we have. So Alex, go ahead.
Sure. Thanks. Well, very important presentation. We can't thank you enough. Unfortunately, this is all too common, and we hear this, Asaf and I hear this from friends and family members who are beginning their semesters, a sense of dread about what is unfolding. And anybody who's looked at, I don't know, the New York Post knows about the vandalism yesterday and today at Cornell University and Columbia, and the list goes on and on. It should be noted that statistically from last semester, public institutions where students receive more public assistance for tuition has a much lower incidence of these things. And that kind of leads me to my question. And what you described is nothing less than the return of the Jewish question. And it comes from the American left and from its Muslim allies in the West and America. And it has these weird kind of Marxist elements against the four olds, old culture, old ideas, kind of intergenerational warfare. And it has this kind of weird Iranian Shiite, great Satan, little Satan kind of cast to it as well. My question, I guess, is how has this, your experience in particular, changed your view about left-wing anti-Semitism?
Well, I'll start by saying that the experience is not the same throughout the country. As you mentioned, big schools, state schools, schools in the South definitely are suffering much less of that. And I can actually say that when I went to a big conference of the International Study Association and compared notes, apparently even among the liberal arts colleges, the colleges on the main line are doing the worst. and Haverford seems to be extremely off the chart. So even among liberal arts colleges, Haverford is relatively unique. We definitely see the anti-Semitism on the left, but it's important to note that, Jews in the United States were coming under attack from anti-Semitism, both from the right, extreme right, and both from the extreme left. What changed for me was the assessment of how prevalent that is, which seems to be that it's became a lot more prevalent. And these ideas are much easier to sell to students, especially these days with social media. At the same time, I've been started 2 years ago, studying a phenomenon of female terrorism. And so I've been reading a lot about the 1960s and 70s in the United States. And you see a lot of similarities. And so I'm looking back at those, I get somewhat optimistic in that, well, first, very few people will go all the way to move to terrorism. And so this is one good thing. Second is that left-wing extremism tend to cannibalize itself. Well, in general, extremism tends to cannibalize, but it's extremely common in left-wing organizations with purity tests. And we are already seeing that at least the coalition that happens outside of the colleges between African American and some of the most radical Marxist pro-Palestinians is getting very fragile because the students are screaming for revolution. But the African American community wants to bring change. And bringing change, when they see an opportunity to actually vote for an African American woman, is just so much more appealing than any kind of revolution that the students are screaming for. And probably pretty much like the students of the 1960s and 70s, once they get out of college, they find it much harder to actually build on that, to have a stronger movement. And now, I'm one of the people that, while I was never progressive, I did not look at the progressive movement with hostility. I now look at them with some hostility because they basically nurtured the anti-Semitism that we see. And when the time came for them to actually stand up and behind their own ideals and support the Jewish people after October 7, they did not, they failed to do so. And so me and many other people on the American left moving away and are actually pretty disgusted by that behavior of the progressives. And part of our challenge for the future would be to know that even those of us that are liberal and want to operate from within the Democratic Party, we need to understand that the progressives are not our allies and that the progressives are something that we got to actually struggle because they are now became converters of anti-Semitism.
Great, thank you. Alex, I'm going to go to the audience as we have a lot. And so, Barak, I'm going to try to get through some of these. Our friend Russell Berman is asking a question. Can you differentiate, within the Haverford community itself in the responses, especially the distinction between humanities and the STEM? So Russell was pointing out correctly, in places in the humanities, we've seen in petitions supporting the anti-Israel side, while STEM have opposed anti-Semitism. So do you see any differences within the faculty, and any observations about which students in particular are active in the wave of anti-Semitism, majors, cohorts, or anything you can point to in your own observations?
I say that the problem is definitely stronger in the humanities. I don't know. Somebody told me that maybe they have too much free time on their hands. But this is also where you don't have commitment to causal thinking, where cause and effect are related. Right? So the humanities allowed for a lot more imagination, which is very nice in literature, but not really great when you try to apply that to politics. But I won't say that this is not happening in the natural sciences. So we have a math professor who celebrated October 7, has been spewing anti-Semitism and anti-Semitic rhetoric since October 7, and that actually has a project, a side project of mapping Jewish power in New York City. Okay? And he's in the math department. I also heard about other departments that have anti-Semitic inclinations, faculty that behind students' backs are laughing at students that have Jewish markers on them, meaning whether yarmulke or if you're an Orthodox. And so I would say this is not just among the humanities. Definitely there is some among the social science. Now, I have to say, most faculty are not involved. Most faculty are just trying to stay away. The atmosphere of fear is such that almost everybody is trying to move away. Only the partisans end up actually being involved. And from our perspective, it's the anti-Jews faculty that are attacking us, and that we have to show up to this fight because we are being under attack. Having said that, some of my colleagues are not really showing up. The attacks are just such that they manage to intimidate almost everybody. Everybody is terrified of speaking up. As for the students, it comes from students from those departments often. Because again, in order to buy into that kind of ideology, you won't find that in fields that have positivist thinking. Your road there to this kind of Marxist theories of race, not Marxist theories, but a distortion of Marxist theories so that they can include race. This is something that students don't come to on their own.
Great, thank you. So a good segue, from our friend Ilan Troen, and again, thank you again for the insights he's commenting on, of course, your courage, because again, one should not minimize what you've done here and speaking out about all of this, and we need more of you to talk about these issues, and a lot, and like yourself, many of us who are on the campuses are facing a lot of these problems in different levels. But Ilan is pointing out, obviously the academic literature is, of course, replete with accusations of, settler colonialism and, Israel's legitimacy and whatnot. Are you seeing any signs of possibility of change? Ilan is trying, and I commend him on that to stay positive, hope, of where we can see some areas where we can improve upon and trying to make things better, or where we need to improve on?
Just to remind people, the academia in the past also promoted theories that today we look at as outrageous. Psychiatry viewed women forever as suffering from particular kind of paranoias that are issues of mental health rather than society. Going way back, eugenics. We have lots of academic theories that over time were debunked as the disgusting stuff that they are. I don't see any reason why the settler colonialism won't go to the garbage bin with that. The problem is that it's sort of a small group of colleagues who are living within a small ecosystem that allows them to publish their own stuff, even though it's just bullshit. I mean, this is academically just, the quality is just, I'm embarrassed that that's what the academia, that people in the academia produce. Now, we do have some scholars like Arnon Degani, for example, an Israeli historian, that does a great job in explaining why the framework of settler colonialism is just such a poor fit to what's going on in the Middle East. But the thing is that with these people, it's not about convincing. It's only once they actually suffer consequences, because these theories just cannot be debunked because they're not really, academic theories. They're not serious theories. But I am optimistic that ultimately, because this is such a stupid and bad idea, it will die. But for that, we need to be a lot more aggressive, because it is really such a stupid idea. Just because the academia or parts of the academia promote it doesn't make it any smaller.
Great, thank you. I'm going to try to combine these two questions here from our friends and colleagues, Cole Bunsell and Robert Lloyd, who are asking about.
Hi, Cole.
Cole sends regards as well. Both asking about the administration and the fact that why has it been so spineless at Haverford and elsewhere, and if you were university presidents, what steps would you take? Robert, also is asking about where has the administration been responding to students and faculty? You're talking about the fear and a hostile environment. If you could comment about those points, that would be great.
I think in some way the story begins in 2020 when we had a social justice strike at Haverford. And since then, the administration adopted anti-racism as their main priority. And then they basically filled all the ranks of the administration with people that are actually supportive of the version of the DEI that I find terrible, that focuses on race. So that's one aspect, ideology. Second aspect is that they are catering to students' wishes. People still think that the balance of power on campuses are that the faculty are strong and students are weak. Wouldn't be any different. So the college leadership is afraid of the students, and it's afraid as most of the vocal students, the most vocal students. Our students are not vocal. More than that, our students are so intimidated that you don't hear their voices. And when they try to complain, there were over 50 bias complaints filed last year by our Jewish students, only to die because they are sent to part of the college that is run by people who share those views, those terrible views on race and anti-Semitism, that basically make any kind of complaints irrelevant. So people are still sending loads of emails and complaints. We see a lot from alumni and parents, but the college is not doing much. And now, because they're under a Title VI lawsuit, they are using that as their excuse why they are not saying anything. But it seems that they're just not responding because they're not seeing any personal cost right now. Or it could be that they understand that at this point, in order to actually bring change, they will have to lose their jobs. Right? And so now they might be attached to their jobs. And because now any kind of change in Haverford will actually require a huge overhaul. This is not just a simple thing of changing one policy or not. Needs to be a changing of the Harvard culture. And to change the Harvard culture, these administrators are probably afraid for their own positions. Much easier to go with the mob than to go with the few Jews that we still have on campus.
Right. Thank you. Mark Cooperberg is asking again a follow-up, to your experience at Haverford. Have there been other than the event that happened at Haverford? Were there other courses that were been disrupted in kind of way, and the kind of hostility that you've seen, or are they just targeting? I'm adding here courses in the humanities. I mean, have we seen that kind of hostility, in other places?
And the hostility doesn't happen that much within the classroom. I suffer specifically, and Jewish students that were more vocal, the very few suffered. I want to remind people, I didn't even mention because we have so much stuff. So in the spring, an event that was supposed to mark an NCAA basketball game that Harvard participated, that was organized to also serve as an anti-Semitism awareness event, was canceled under the pressure of the dean of the college on the student that wanted to organize that. Right? And so we don't see that. So I would say that usually you won't see much of that kind of intrusion into Middle East politics happening inside the classroom. There aren't that many people that teach about relevant subject. Some do, and we are definitely worried. And we're especially worried because they can do that under academic freedom, guys, even if they put something and say stuff in class that is just not about the content of the class. In reality, my classes are actually some of the few that should be touching this subject. But yeah, much of what's happening is actually out of the classroom.
Great, thank you. There are a few questions. I'll try to combine them, but it's going back to your own lawsuit, as far as the Title VI. Has that had any kind of ripple effect, within the Haverford community, especially on the administration? And the other question that was asked here, is this the first time historically that Haverford has gotten slapped with a Title VI issue regarding, the environment itself? I'm adding here, is there any concern that, the recent hearings on Capitol Hill are going to impact small liberal arts colleges like Haverford, or they feel like they are kind of on the fray, so nobody's focusing on them, so they get away with it because they're not so much in the news?
Well, I think you're right. Liberal arts colleges are less afraid because the big schools are sucking all the air. We can't get much media attention to Haverford when UPenn implodes, just 20 minutes away from us. I forgot the first part of the question. If you can just
the ripple.
The response to the Title VI.
Title VI.
I don't know if there was another Title VI kind of complaint. Definitely, I'm sure that I don't think there was something that related to anti-Semitism. I want to just clarify. Title VI would be about allowing the students to actually learn without discrimination. That's not relevant for me. If I end up doing something, I will need to probably turn to Title VII for hostile work environment. Now, the Title VI sort of gave the college a way to not say anything. But we were hoping that the Title VI will also lead the college to pursue some meaningful reform. Instead, what the college did was to try to ask for dismissal of the case. From my understanding, really using the a very narrow definition of what it actually means to be a Jew, and relying on freedom of speech kind of argument and washing their hands from responsibility. But I have to say that the Title VI lawsuit was read by many Haverford alumni, and the Title VI lawsuit contributed significantly to the Jewish community dissociating themselves from Haverford, to many people deciding that they're not going to give any money anymore to Haverford, definitely not until Haverford actually changes its ways. And so in this regard, the Title VI lawsuit already had some kind of impact, in that the college knows that somebody is watching them. But they are still thinking that they can get away with a lot of crap by just, doing as little as possible, so that they can say that, we did the job. I hope that no judge will find that convincing, because what they're doing is definitely not fighting anti-Semitism. They're just trying to cover their asses.
Thank you. Well, look, Barak, I mean, our time unfortunately is up. I know you had a lot to say, and we appreciate everything that you're doing, and really you're taking a stance and your courage for all of that. It's part of the reasons that both SPME and ESMIA are here, to support any way we can. So we thank you for taking the time to share your story with us. If we can be of any help in the future, please let us know. And of course, we'd love to have you back. To keep us posted on what's going on and how we can help on all of these fronts.
I'll be happy to, and I want to thank everybody that was on this call. And if anybody still have questions that I was unable to answer because of the time, please feel free to email me at Haverford. I'll be happy. This kind of engagement is really important for us as we struggle, because we need to bring the community into this conflict. I did not mention the fact that Haverford College and the other colleges are in the midst of a very large Jewish community. I think that it's important that the Jewish community around us will be aware of what's going on in their backyard, and that it will not tolerate that kind of anti-Semitism in our midst. We should not tolerate anti-Semitism anywhere. But to have that on the main line, such a central concentration for the Jewish community, only to see Haverford College completely ignoring this Jewish community, this is unacceptable. And I do hope that this conversation would help in getting the community around us to help us out, because we need more pressure on this administration. The problem of anti-Semitism is not going anywhere anytime soon, and we need more forces with us.
100%.
So thank you so much.
Well, we're here for that, and thank you for everything. I want to thank, as always, Alex for joining me, my co-host, and thank all of you for joining us this afternoon. Again, to echo Barak's point, I apologize for not getting to all the questions. Feel free to email us as well. If we need to pass them on to Barak, we will. And be on the lookout for future webinars. Hope everybody has a good and safe day, and we will talk soon. So have a good day.
Thank you.
Thank you, Barak. Thanks, Alex.